Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the NHL Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a coaching change in Vancouver, some more injury updates, and some trade rumors involving the Vancouver Canucks, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here. Now I would usually start things off with a signing or two that have happened recently, but there are no signings as of late, so not really anything to get into there. But I will start off with the big news from over the weekend, as the Vancouver Canucks have finally fired head coach Boudreau and have replaced him with Rick Tocchet. Now this was a move that was speculated to be happening for the last 2-3 weeks. There was a lot of speculation that Boudreau's time in Vancouver was coming to an end and that Tocchet would be the replacement, and it has finally happened. So I think it's good that they finally got this over with. It ends this saga for the Vancouver Canucks. I think the way they handled Boudreau's departure was not overly good. I mean, there was a lot of speculation over the past couple of weeks that Tocchet was going to be the coach, and I think just leading on Boudreau like that just wasn't really fair to him. I already know that they fired Boudreau, so if they were already going to do it a couple weeks ago, they should have probably done it then instead of letting this drag on. But definitely think that to finally get the coaching situation dealt with is good. Boudreau had a pretty good record with the Vancouver Canucks, as in 103 games he had 50 wins, 40 losses, and 13 overtime losses. For a pretty good record in 103 games with the Canucks, spent just probably a little bit over a year with Vancouver, and he did okay. I mean, he did not start out well this year. The Canucks have done okay since their awful start. They're still nowhere close to a playoff spot, but definitely think that Boudreau was a really good coach for the Vancouver Canucks. He also got his 600th career win as an NHL coach earlier this year, so I think Boudreau was a really good coach for the Vancouver Canucks. It would not surprise me if he got another opportunity elsewhere with another team who would probably need a coach maybe this year or next. And they also fired assistant coach Trent Cull as well. So Boudreau and Cull are out in Vancouver, and they've replaced them with 3 new faces. Now to start off with, they got new head coach Rick Tocchet. He should bring a lot of experience to this Canucks organization. He has been head coach on multiple occasions. From 2008 to 2010, he was head coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and from 2017 to 2021, he was head coach of the Arizona Coyotes. So he has had multiple coaching stints. He was also an assistant coach with the Pittsburgh Penguins when they went to win back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. So he does have a lot of experience. He coached in 438 games with the Bolts and Coyotes combined, putting up a okay record with 178 wins, 200 regulation losses, and 60 overtime losses. So he's done okay. I think the addition of Tocchet will provide some stability to that Canucks organization. I definitely think that Tocchet could be a really good coach for the Vancouver Canucks. They've also added former NHL defenseman Adam Foote to the coaching staff as a assistant coach. And they've also brought in the former NHL defenseman Sergei Gonchar to help as a defensive coach. So definitely think that adding these 3 guys is going to be good. They all provide experience and should help the Canucks be a better team. I still don't think the Canucks are anywhere going to make the playoffs this year. But definitely think that to get the saga over with, finally fire Boudreau and hire Tocchet after this has been dragging on for the last few weeks is good. Hopefully Boudreau can find some opportunity elsewhere. I think after what he's went through the past few weeks, he probably will. As for Tocchet, he starts his 10 year in Vancouver. Does sound like he's going to be signed for this year, next year at around $2.75 million. So with that, the Canucks are still paying Boudreau and Green as well as Tocchet. So they're paying 3 coaches $7 million, which is quite surprising. But I definitely think that the way all of this was dragging on, they needed to make a change, and they finally did. So hopefully Tocchet can do good as the head coach in Vancouver, and hopefully Boudreau can find some place elsewhere to coach. Now let's go over to the injury update part of the video. We'll start with the Hurricanes, as there have been some more bad injury news for Carolina. Now to start with, Jacob Slavin missed the Carolina Hurricanes' most recent game and is out with a lower body injury for an unknown period of time. Now losing their best defenseman is never a good situation, especially for the Canes. They have some okay depth and they should be able to get through the next few weeks without Slavin, but definitely not an ideal situation for Carolina. Slavin's a really good top pair defenseman, and I expect him to continue to do well, so don't think his injury will be too long, hopefully only a week or 2, but he is out for an unknown period of time, so it is a little bit difficult to determine when he's going to be back, but hopefully Slavin could be back in the next few games for the Hurricanes. I don't expect him to be out too long, but you never know with some of these injuries. And then the other more significant injury was that Max Pacioretty has another Achilles injury, and he's going to be out for an indefinite period of time. Now, Pacioretty suffered an Achilles injury in early August, and he had been out for 5.5 months due to his injury, And given the fact he has another Achilles injury, he's probably going to be out for at least 3 to 4 months, would be my guess. So he's probably not going to be back until sometime after the season. My guess is Pacioretty's regular season is done. Maybe he gets back in time for the playoffs, but definitely possible that he could miss the playoffs as well. It's just really bad season for Pacioretty, coming off of one injury and then going on to another. So hopefully he can get back in good time. But with Pacioretty being injured, there's some speculation now that the Carolina Hurricanes could be in the market for a top 6 forward, and that with Pacioretty's injury and the Hurricanes now having a little bit more cap space, that they could go out and maybe acquire a forward and sort of change the landscape of the trade market right now. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. But Pacioretty has missed a whole bunch of time due to injuries this year, and he's had a lot of injury history over the past few years. And given the fact he's a pending free agent, that just doesn't help him very much. So hopefully Pacioretty can get back, maybe in the playoffs, but it's quite possible that his season is done. So hopefully Pacioretty can recover, be healthy, maybe get himself a contract in the offseason and prove that he can still be a good goal-scoring forward. Now, as for the Islanders, they've had both good and bad news on the injury front. So to start with the good news, they were able to get top 4 defenseman back, Adam Pelech, as well as top 9 forward Kyle Palmieri off of injury reserve, and both were able to get back into game action in the Islanders' most recent game. Now, for both of these guys, they've both been out since December. Pelech had been out for over a month, and Palmieri for just about a month. So getting these guys back is huge. Palmieri's not the best of forwards in New York, but he's a good middle 6 forward, and I think getting him back in the lineup is huge. He can definitely help offensively, and I think he should be a key addition to that Islanders top 9. As for Pelech, he's a top 2 defenseman for the Islanders. Plays a lot in the top pair for the Islanders with Ryan Pulock, and those two make a really good pair. So to get him back is huge. I know the Islanders struggled a bit defensively with Pelech out of the lineup, and I think getting him back is good. It gives them a little bit more depth, and hopefully he can help them stabilize that defensive core. But they did have a few more injuries as well, as depth forward Hudson Fasching and fourth line forward Kyle Clutterbuck were both placed in injury reserve and are day-to-day with injuries. Clutterbuck has an upper body injury, Fasching has a lower body injury. And as for Noah Dobson, he's also out right now, day-to-day with an undisclosed injury. Now for Clutterbuck and Fasching, they're not two significant pieces for this Islanders team. Fasching was called up when they were dealing with a few other injuries. He's a good substitute fourth line forward who can get into some game action, and he's actually done really well during his call-ups. But I don't think losing him to injury reserve for the next little while is going to be overly significant. He's only out day-to-day right now, so I don't think he should be out too long, maybe like a week or two. But still, losing another healthy body is not overly ideal. As for Kyle Clutterbuck, he's been in and out of this lineup this year due to injuries. He's a good fourth line forward, part of a really good fourth line in New York with guys like Zizekas and Martin, and those three play really well on the fourth line. So losing him is not going to be great, but once again, he's only out for a day-to-day right now, and he should only miss the next week or two. So hopefully the Owls will get Clutterbuck and Fasching back soon, but I don't think it's too bad for the Islanders to lose these two pieces for the next little bit. As for Noah Dobson, he's a really good piece for the Islanders. Plays really good top 4 minutes and is probably the Islanders' best offensive defenseman. And he's a really, really good piece. So losing him for the next little while is not going to be good. Dobson hasn't been placed in injury reserve as of right now, and he's only out day-to-day with an undisclosed injury, so I wouldn't even be surprised if he was back in the next game or two. But definitely not overly ideal for the Islanders to lose another key top 4 defenseman. I mean, they bring in Pelech, but they then lose Dobson to injury. So hopefully Dobson can get back soon. He's a really good top 4 defenseman and is a really big piece of the Islanders' blue line. And hopefully him, as well as Fasching and Clutterbuck, can get back from their injuries in the near future. Over in Florida, they've definitely had a couple of injury scares over the past week and have gotten some guys back as well. Both Sam Bennett and Aaron Ekblad went down with injuries for the Panthers over the weekend, but they were both cleared to play just 2 days later and have gone back into game action for the Panthers. So it's good that Bennett and Ekblad were not injured for too long. I know a lot of people were concerned with the Panthers possibly losing Ekblad again and maybe losing Bennett as well. But it's good that those two were able to get back into game action quite quickly. Bennett's a really good middle 6 forward, so losing him would have been not too ideal, but I think they would have had some pieces to replace him. As for Ekblad, he's their best defenseman, so the Panthers are breathing a sigh of relief that they did not lose Ekblad for any games, and that he's still healthy and ready to play. As for the goaltending situation, they lost Sergei Bobrovsky over the weekend due to a lower body injury, and he's going to miss an unknown period of time right now. Now, Bobrovsky has missed the past couple of games. It's not overly ideal for the Panthers to lose their starting goaltender. I know Bobrovsky is a really good goalie. He's, I think, really overpaid with the $10 million contract he has, but he's still a really good goaltender for Florida. So losing him for an extended period of time would not be good. Given the fact he's out for an unknown period of time, it's going to be really hard to decipher when he's going to get back. But he also hasn't been placed in injury reserve yet, so it wouldn't surprise me if he was back in the next week or two. But still, losing Bobrovsky for the next little while, not a great situation for the Panthers. As for Spencer Knight, he was activated off of injury reserve and should be back to game action in the next game or two. Knight's a really good goalie. He seems like the starter of the future for the Panthers, and he looks like a really, really elite level goalie. So hopefully Spencer Knight can get back into game action quickly. I know he's missed a little bit of time and was sent down to the AHL for a couple of games, but getting him back up to the NHL is good. I believe that he should get into game action in the next game or two and should continue to help give the Panthers really good goaltending, as the Panthers should continue to try to get back in the playoff contention. As for Eric Staal, he's had a concussion and he is out week to week due to injury. Now, Stahl's been placed in injury reserve, so he's probably going to miss at least the next week or two, if not more. Really a bad injury for the Panthers. Stahl's been a good fourth-line forward over the past few months for the Panthers, so losing him is not going to be ideal, but I do think that they should be able to make do without him. And hopefully him and Bobrovsky can get back into game action in the near future, but definitely great job for the Panthers to get Knight back and avoid big injury scares with Bennett and Ekblad. Over in Ottawa, they've had a lot of good injury news over the past little while, but they have had one significant injury. Now, they have been able to activate forwards Mathieu Joseph and Ruke Charterer, as well as defenseman Nikita Zaitsev off injury reserve, and those guys should all get back into game action in the near future. Joseph has gotten back into game action. He's a really good middle six forward for the Sens, so getting him back is going to help the Sens team a lot. I know that he's missed the past couple of weeks due to an injury, so getting him back is pretty good. As for Charterer, he's more of a depth forward for the Sens. Not even sure if he'll get into much game action right now, with the Sens starting to become a lot more healthier, but getting another healthy body back is huge. As for Zaitsev, he's been a third-pair defenseman. He's also spent some time in the minors this year, so definitely think that getting him back is great to get another healthy body back, but he's not really a significant addition to this team. So good to get some more healthy bodies back, but the significant injury for the Ottawa Senators was that Josh Norris has re-injured his shoulder, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season due to the injury. Now that's awful news. Norris missed a good chunk of the early part of the season due to his shoulder injury. Only got back like a week or two ago, and he's now going to miss another significant period of time. So really awful news for the Senators. Norris is their top-line center and one of their better offensive producers. So losing him for the next little while is not going to be great, but hopefully they will be able to make do and still compete for a playoff spot. I know that the Senators are one of the lower teams in the Eastern Conference, but hopefully they can still push for a playoff spot, even without their top-line center in Josh Norris. And lastly here with the Pittsburgh Penguins, they have also had a few injury updates, but most of it has been good, as they were able to activate Jeff Petrie off of long-term injury reserve, and Tristan Jarry and Ryan Poehling off of injury reserve, and all three have gone back into game action. Poehling is a really good fourth-line center. He showed that a lot this year, and he can definitely help contribute in the bottom six and is definitely a good depth scorer. So getting him back is huge for the Penguins. As for Jarry, he's their starting goaltender. So obviously they've had to make do with the Smith and Tokarski over the past few weeks. So getting Jarry back is a huge boost to the Penguins goaltending core. And with Jeff Petrie, he's a top four defenseman for the Penguins right now. So getting him back as well, especially with Chris Letang on injury reserve still right now, is amazing. And adding all three of these players back into the lineup is good. They have had some more injuries as well, as Jan Ruta has been placed on IR with an undisclosed injury and is out day-to-day right now. I don't think Ruta should be out for too much longer. He's already missed a few games, and I think he should only be out for like a week or two more, but definitely he's a good third-pair defenseman, and he showed it this year, and he can even help some offensively, and he's really stepped up, especially with guys like Petrie and Letang out right now. So losing him is not great for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And they've also lost Kasperi Kapanen due to a lower body injury, and he's going to be out week to week with an injury. Now, Kapanen hasn't gone to much games recently. He had been a fourth-line forward in healthy scratch over the past few weeks. But losing another healthy body is not going to be good. I know they just got Paling back, but losing Kapanen is not going to be overly great. He hasn't been placed in injury reserve yet, but it's quite possible he could be. And I think, given the fact he's out week to week, he's probably going to miss a few weeks at least. So definitely think that Kapanen being out for the foreseeable future is not going to be great for the Penguins, but I don't think it's too much of a loss for the Penguins, especially with Kapanen not being consistent forward. So definitely good to get guys like Jari, Petrie, and Paling back, but hopefully Kapanen and Ruda can get back into game action in the very near future. Now that's all the injury updates I want to talk about for today. Now let's go over to the trade rumor part of the video. We'll start with Bo Horvat and the Vancouver Canucks, as there have been a lot of Bo Horvat talks over the past week, as on the 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman said that the Canucks are trying to thin out the field and find out who's seriously interested in Horvat and will be willing to meet their asking price. Now, it did come out over the weekend that the asking price for Bo Horvat would be 3 players as well as a top prospect. I find it surprising that the Canucks would not want a first-round pick for Horvat. I still think that they would try and get a first-round pick, but it definitely does seem like the Canucks really want 3 players for Horvat. And it sounds like some of the teams who are leading the charge for Horvat right now would be the Boston Bruins, Minnesota Wild, and maybe the Carolina Hurricanes. We know that the Hurricanes and Wild are not too good at center. We know that the Carolina Hurricanes have not trusted Kotkaniemi enough right now at the center position, and they've had to use Paul Stastny as second-line center numerous times this year. We also know that the Wild do have some okay centers, and with guys like Frederick Boudreau and Sam Steele, and Marco Rossi started out the season and should be a long-term center for the Minnesota Wild, but their center depth right now is not really great. And given the fact that they want to go for it this year, they could definitely use a top-line center like a Horvat. As for Boston, their center depth is a lot better than the other two, with Krejci and Bergeron being their top 2 centers. But adding another guy like Horvat, who's done a really good job producing offensively this year, would be a great addition for the Boston Bruins. Now, it does sound like the Canucks at this point have not been willing to let other teams talk to Horvat about an extension, and it does sound like at this point they would just be wanting to move him as a rental. That could change in the next week or two as we get closer to the deadline, but for the time being, it does sound like they just want to move Horvat as a rental right now, and they wouldn't be willing to let anyone talk. But if those 3 teams in Boston, Carolina, and Minnesota are the teams leading the charge for Horvat, I mean, if I was the Canucks, I would probably ask for maybe like a Fabian Lysell from Boston. I know the Canucks have had a lot of interest in Lysell dating back to last year. So if they could probably like a Lysell out of Boston, maybe a guy like Brandon Carlo. I know they need some stability on the defensive end. Carlo signed long-term for a reasonable amount of money. So I could see maybe like a Lysell Carlo, and then maybe like another player, or maybe like a second or first round pick as well. Maybe be the trade package from Boston. If you're looking at Minnesota, they have a lot of defensemen. I know there's been a lot of talk about possibly moving Matt Dumba. I'm not sure how much interest the Canucks would have, given the fact that he's a pending free agent. But maybe they would be interested in Dumba. I know the Wild also have a lot of young defensemen. We know that Addison's done well this year in the NHL. But they also have a couple of youngsters, like a Ryan O'Rourke, Damian Hunt, Carson Lambos, Brock Faber. So there's a lot of good young defensemen from Minnesota. I'm not exactly sure how many could be regulars in the Wild lineup. So maybe like one of those young prospects, and maybe another player from the Wild roster, as well as a young prospect or second or first round pick could maybe be the asking price for Minnesota. For Carolina, I'm not sure if they would be willing to do this, but maybe Brett Pesce would be of interest to Vancouver. I know that the Carolina Hurricanes don't have too much depth on the blue line and really do like Pesce. So I'm not sure if they'll be willing to move him, but the Canucks need a stabilizing right shot defenseman, and Pesce's a really good stabilizing right shot defenseman, so maybe they'll be interested in him. I know that maybe a Ryan Suzuki would be a good prospect. I know the Carolina Hurricanes don't have too many good prospects, but Suzuki was a former first-round pick who hasn't had a really good shot at the NHL level. He could be a good middle six center in the next couple of years. So maybe something like a Brett Pesce, a Ryan Suzuki, Another pick-up prospect would be asking price for Vancouver, but definitely think that those three could easily be the front runners right now. And there's been a lot of other teams interested, like a Colorado Avalanche, the Seattle Kraken, the Vegas Golden Knights, New Jersey Devils. Those guys have all shown interest as well. But the asking price seems too high for like the Avs or the Kraken. Not really heard too much about the Knights, and it seems like the Devils want more of a winger than a center. So they'd be willing to maybe go after like a Timo Meier or a Patrick Kane instead of a Horvat. So definitely think that Horvat's situation is going to be interesting with the coaching change now done with Vancouver. There'll definitely be a lot of trade speculation over the next little while. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with Horvat, and I can't wait to see who ends up acquiring Horvat. But I'd like to know what you think. Which team do you think will get Horvat, and what would the trade package be going back to Vancouver? Over with the Columbus Blue Jackets, not too much news, but we have found out that the Columbus Blue Jackets are willing to let other teams talk to Vladislav Gavrikov about an extension. Now, it does sound like the Jackets would love to keep him. He's a really good top four defenseman, has done really well over the past couple of years in Columbus. But the asking price that they could get for Gavrikov could be huge. It sounds like they're looking for the same sort of price tag they got for David Savard a couple of years ago, which was a first and third round pick. And I do think they could easily get Gavrikov the way the defensive market's gone over the past few years. And I think if they were to move Gavrikov for a first and third round pick, they should definitely do it. Also, Gavrikov's cap hit right now is only at $2.8 million, so definitely a really good cap hit, and a lot of contending teams could probably fit that under their salary cap. So definitely it seems like Gavrikov's an appealing player to a lot of teams. I know there's been some talk like maybe the Maple Leafs and the Oilers will be interested. There's also been some talk about maybe the Bruins being interested. What about the Golden Knights, the Pittsburgh Penguins? The Kings wanted a left shot defenseman. The Kraken could use some depth on defense. So there's a lot of teams who could probably have interest in Gavrikov. And especially for a team who doesn't have too much cap space, getting Gavrikov, who's a lot cheaper than maybe some of the other players, would be good for them. So definitely think that Gavrikov will probably most likely be moved before the deadline. It still wouldn't surprise me too much if Gavrikov re-upped with Columbus, but definitely looking like a trade is going to happen right now. And if Gavrikov can work out an extension with the acquiring team, then maybe the Jackets get even more in an asking price. But definitely something to keep our eye on. And lastly, with the Chicago Blackhawks, on the 32 Thoughts segment over on Hockey Night in Canada, Jeff Merrick said that Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews situations haven't really been finalized right now, and they're probably going to determine their situation in mid-February. Now, it sounded like they wanted to have the situation resolved by now, and that they wanted to sort of weed out the teams who were really interested in Toews or Kane, but it does sound like that due to Kane's injury and all the other things, they haven't really talked about all of that right now. So it does sound like they'll probably discuss with Toews and Kane their futures sometime in mid-February, so probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks would be my guess. So it's definitely sounding like sometime between mid-February and the March 3rd trade deadline is when we'll possibly see a Kane or Toews trade. Kane is traded, my guess would be that he goes to one of the New York teams, whether it be the Isles, the Devils, or the Rangers. And there's a lot of speculation about the Rangers, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he maybe went to the Isles or Devils. I think that all three of those teams could use a goal scorer like Patrick Kane. As for Toews, I still think that if he was to be traded, maybe the Winnipeg Jets would be a likely landing spot. I know that they have a lot of good centers right now, but Scheifele's a year away from unrestricted free agency, and it sounds like Dubois really wants to go to Montreal in the long term, so I definitely think that acquiring Toews would be a really good boost for the Jets. They've done really well this year, but I've said for the past little while that they could definitely benefit from having some more added depth on the forward group. So definitely think that if Toews were to be traded, maybe Winnipeg's a likely landing spot. But there's also some talk that the Hawks would be willing to move a defenseman or two. On the 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman said that maybe they will be willing to move a Jake McCabe or a Connor Murphy. Both guys are signed pretty long term. McCabe has this year plus 2 more seasons at $4 million. And Murphy has this year plus 3 more seasons at $4.4 million. And there's definitely been a lot of talk around Jake McCabe possibly being moved before the deadline. I definitely think Murphy is probably the less likely given the fact he has 1 more year and a little bit higher cap hit. But I would definitely think that McCabe possibly for the Hawks could be moved before the deadline. I definitely think that a stabilizing top 4 defenseman could definitely help a lot of teams. I would possibly say Murphy, probably less likely, but it's definitely a possibility. The Hawks are one of the worst teams in the NHL right now, and will probably be looking to get as much draft capital as they can before the deadline. So moving guys like Murphy or McCabe would not be too surprising, and definitely do think that moving as many players as they can before the deadline to get some assets for the future would not be too surprising. And I definitely think that a McCabe trade could definitely happen before the deadline. And even though it's probably less likely, Murphy will definitely be a player to keep our eye on. But definitely like to know what you think. Do you think Toews and Kane end up being traded? And if so, where do they go? And do you think McCabe or Murphy could wind up being dealt before the deadline? But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I will leave a link to in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next week's video. See you guys soon.